This is the first time that Ramblin' Rusty has visited the World War II Memorial. I went with my son Warren. He was supposed to take pictures of an honor flight that was flying into Washington, D.C. that morning. Well, they didn't show up, and he didn't realize that until he got there and set up. But it was a good chance for me to visit the memorial. We walked there, and one of the first things that I saw from a distance was the north entrance to the memorial. And in the north entrance, there are a set of 4 eagles up on top that represent the United States. And so this is a beautiful entrance to the northern entrance to the World War II memorial. And then when you step inside, you'll see what it's like. It's a very beautiful setup. There are many things which symbolic around the edge. If you look them up, they'll tell you more about it. But you're just looking around the fountain, and it faces the Lincoln Memorial. I did not take time and didn't think about it to look the other direction. The other direction, you would have seen the Washington Monument. And it's a real nice place. There are signs all around that says you may sit down and put your feet in the water, but please don't walk or wade in the water. There are many sayings around the edge of this memorial. This first one says, women who stepped up were measured as citizens of the nation, not as women. This was a people's war, and everyone was in it. Along the north side of the ceremonial entrance, there are 24 brass reliefs created by sculptor Ray Keski. These are depicting what is happening both on the home front and the battle scenes, highlighting the sacrifice and determination that the nation gave. I started recording them in reverse, so we will start at the end of World War II on the Atlantic Theater. Following the Battle of the Bulge and a winter of hard fighting, the Allies plowed into Germany on all sides. On April 25, 1945, the American and Russian armies finally met at the Elbe River. American troops there discovered how hard the war had been for Russia, finding women fighting in combat alongside the men. The Allied victory over Germany arrived 12 days later with unconditional surrender. By mid-December 1944, the Allies, standing on the doorstep of Germany, believed that Hitler's army had all but lost. That belief changed when Hitler launched into a massive offensive into Belgium, breaking the Allied line, creating a large bulge. Dogged resistance by the American units surrounded at key crossroad towns along the German fuel shortages brought about the demise of Hitler's December offensive. During the American Civil War, minor battlefield wounds often proved fatal. By the Second World War, the survival rate of combat wounded improved dramatically due to the advances in medicine and the use of Army medics and naval corpsmen. Medics and corpsmen often treated wounded under fire in the field, making them some of the bravest on the battlefield. Following the invasion of Normandy, Allied and American troops launched Operation Cobra, breaking through the German defenses. Tanks aided the infantrymen in the field and played an integral part in the breakout into France. The American M4 Sherman, inferior to many German tanks in armor and armament, proved to be a highly successful due to its large production numbers. After nearly 2 years of attacking German-held positions in France with bomber aircraft, the Allies launched the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944. The joint operation, codename Overlord, landed Allied troops on the northern shores of France. Landing craft successfully delivered troops to Normandy shores to a most galling German fire and heavy laden with beach obstacles. Fighter aircraft, bombers, and transport aircraft each became a necessity to the Allied war effort. Transport aircraft especially introduced a new method of delivering troops to the front line. They dropped highly skilled airborne troops called paratroopers behind enemy lines at places such as Sicily, Normandy, Holland, and Germany. During the Second World War, aircraft became a virtual instrument of warfare. Allied bombers, protected by fighter escort, destroyed enemy factories, infrastructures, including railroads and bridges. Sadly, enemy fighter planes, along with anti-aircraft fire called flak, devastated thousands of air crews. The B-17 Flying Fortress fought alongside many other famous planes, including the P-51 Mustang. To hamper the transport of our industrial might across the Atlantic, the German Navy effectively utilized its U-boat submarine force. Operating in groups called wolf packs, U-boats sank over 2,500 Allied ships by the war's end. The implementation of the convoy system and the breaking of German codes substantially aided the Allied victory in the Atlantic. Due to severe manpower shortage, factories increasingly employed women whose pre-war roles kept them at home. These women helped build aircraft, ships, and tanks vital to the war effort. Nicknamed Rosie the Riveter, substantially increased the production of war materials to unheard of levels. Prior to the United States' entry into the war with Japan and Germany, many of its future allies, including Great Britain, Russia, and China, desperately needed assistance instituting the land lease policy. President Franklin Roosevelt agreed to lease ships, tanks, jeeps, and food with Allied payment to follow after the war. Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy no matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion of the American people. In their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. The following reliefs appear along the south side of the ceremonial entrance and illustrate images associated with the Pacific theater of the war. December 7, 1941, became a day that thrust the United States into a war that had been raging across the globe for nearly a decade. The United States offered its allies limited help through the Lend-Lease program. The Japanese attack against the United States Navy's Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor shocked and enraged a nation, prompting a congressional declaration of war. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, vast numbers of Americans anxious to defend their country enlisted in the armed forces. Despite the huge volunteer rates, the draft initiated in October 16, 1940, became the military's answer to manpower shortage. Men and women became members of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Merchant Marines. Millions of Americans joined the military services at the onset of World War II. After extensive training at home, these brave men and women boarded ships, embarking on their crusade against a tyranny and oppression. Luxury liners such as the RMS Queen Mary served as a cramped transport vessels, taking our trips over there. In order to assist our allies, President Franklin Roosevelt established a policy of lending them war material to transport that material overseas. American shipyards boosted production dramatically to meet the demand. Ship construction was not limited to transport vessels, however. Following the devastating attack at Pearl Harbor and throughout the war, warships became equally important. War raged across the globe, creating desperate agricultural needs. U.S. allies receiving aid through the Lend-Lease program found food and other agricultural products equally as important as war material. In order to meet the global needs, American farms recovering from the Depression became the breadbasket of the world. The United States Navy had a difficult time recovering from Pearl Harbor. Battleships, the rulers of the sea, had been decimated, forcing aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines to take the lead. Submarines became extremely effective in stealthily targeting the enemy shipping. These underwater vessels were very cramped and uncomfortable for the brave sailors who manned them. The naval war in the Pacific evolved dramatically during the early months of the war. Battleships that had previously dominated the sea took a back seat to the aircraft carrier. Carriers had the ability to deliver massive amounts of firepower at great distances. This new style of naval warfare played a dramatic role in the success of the United States strategy of hopping from one island to another. The United States, in order to liberate Japanese-occupied territory throughout the Pacific and bring an end to the war, adopted a new strategy of fighting. It was called island hopping. It entailed amphibious landing and depositing the troops and equipment required to capture the islands, and thus making a new air base. Once the island was secured, it became the staging ground for the next series of attacks of moving closer to Japan. The troops landed on the beaches. They found themselves fighting in the middle of dense jungles. Jungle warfare proved to be a miserable experience for most of the veterans that endured it. The hot, humid climate, disease-carrying insects, combined with a well-fortified enemy to make fighting in the jungles less than enjoyable. Thousands of American soldiers died fighting in the jungles of the Pacific. It was logistically impossible to immediately return the fallen heroes to their families back home. Field burials became a necessity in order to deal with the rising number of combat deaths. The upturned M1 rifle with the helmet placed on top served as a temporary tombstone for many troops. Thousands of U.S. servicemen and women were taken prisoner. Whether they were shot down pilots from aircraft carriers, rescued sailors from torpedoed ships, captured soldiers from Bataan, they found themselves confined in Japanese prison camps. Liberation came late in the war for many of those malnourished, poorly treated Americans. More than 4 miserable years of hard fighting against determined foe, word of a Japanese surrender arrived in the Pacific on August 14, 1945. Aboard the USS Missouri on September 2, 1945, Japanese government representatives signed documents officially ending the war. This was a day of great celebration, and it was either called Victory Day or Victory Japan Day or just VJ Day. They fought together, brothers in arms. They died together, and now they sleep side by side. To them, we have a solemn obligation. The rest of this vlog will show the two main areas of conflict, the Atlantic and the Pacific. Thank you for those who have served and those who are serving so that we can be free.